You need to know this. With less than a week to go until the Iowa caucuses, it's anyone's guess which Republican candidate will come out on top in the Hawkeye state. According to the latest poll out of Iowa conducted by the American Research Group, it's essentially a three-way tie for first, with Ron Paul at 21%, Mitt Romney at 20%, and Newt Gingrich at 19%. So it looks like at least one of these guys will win, right? Well, not so fast. Occupy Iowa Caucus Movement is now urging registered voters to attend next week's caucus, but not to vote for any of the candidates. Instead, people are being urged to vote for the guy named uncommitted. That's right, uncommitted is an option on the ballot. As a message from the Occupy Iowa Caucus website says, every Iowan who identifies with the 99% should caucus on the evening of January 3rd. But after years of foreclosures, bailouts, corruption, warfare, corporate welfare, and the erosion of our freedoms, we cannot support any of the presidential candidates. We cannot consent to this broken system any longer. We will join with our neighbors and caucus for uncommitted. Uncommitted means we support no candidates and sends a strong message to the leaders of both parties. So what would that mean if no one comes out of Iowa a winner? For more on this, I'm joined by John Nichols, Washington correspondent of The Nation magazine. John, welcome back.
It's good to be with you, Tom.
So how serious a threat is the uncommitted vote in Iowa?
Well, it actually could be a very serious threat. As recently as 1992, in the Democratic caucuses, uncommitted came in second. And back in the 1970s, uncommitted beat the leading candidate, all the other candidates, for the Democratic victory in both 1972 and 1976. Also in the 1980s, uncommitted beat Bob Dole in 1980 and beat Alexander Haig in 1988. So uncommitted has been a factor in Iowa politics for a long time. And if even, say, 20,000 Iowans were to show up at the caucuses and vote uncommitted, they could well displace one of the leading contenders.
Uncommitted is essentially the same thing as none of the above, right?
Well, in a sense, what it means is that, Iowa has a multi-step process, and so you go to the caucuses, you choose county delegates, who choose district delegates, and ultimately choose the state's delegation to the National Convention. Theoretically, you could send a substantial number of delegates to the Republican National Convention or the Democratic National Convention who are committed to no candidate, but who are committed to a set of positions, to an ideology. And that could be a very powerful signal. Imagine if at the Republican National Convention you had not just delegates from Iowa, but perhaps from a number of other states standing up and saying, look, we don't accept Mitt Romney's view that corporations are people. That could be a very powerful and, frankly, very newsy development.
That's amazing. That would essentially be how the Electoral College was envisioned by the framers when they put together the Constitution, was that local communities would define or appoint or elect the wise elder of the community, and then send that person off with some ideas or some thoughts, but basically to let them make their own mind up. I mean, it didn't work out that way by 1800, but interesting idea.
It would be a value-based politics, Tom.
Right. Yeah.
And imagine if at both the Democratic and the Republican National Conventions, you had 10, 15% of the delegates who were there uncommitted except to a 99% view that big banks shouldn't run things, that corporations shouldn't run things, that we should clean up our politics and not be driven by Citizens United money. This could be one of the most exciting developments in our politics this year, perhaps more important than any of the candidates.
Now, that's a real positive look at it. This thing is biting the Republicans on the butt, or at least has a threat to, with this being the Republican primary. But wouldn't the same uncommitted, or if it were to be interpreted as a none of the above sentiment, possibly hurt Democrats in November? Isn't that ultimately a problem for the entire electoral process, regardless of party?
I don't think so. I actually like the idea of inserting ideas into our politics and values. Then it becomes a competition between the two parties to rise to that higher standard, to appeal to this mass of people that are saying we want a different and better politics.
But those values, John, aren't on the ballot. So you don't know if the uncommitted candidate is there because he got the KKK vote, or if he's there because he got the 99% vote, the Occupy Wall Street vote. for example?
It's always an organizing project, and you're absolutely right. This is volatile stuff, and the political parties always seek to shut this down. They always seek in the stepped process of choosing delegates to get rid of the uncommitteds. I'm just saying that if you had a committed group of people who saw the process through, got to the convention, and said, for instance, no, we are not going to vote for a platform that supports tax breaks for big corporations. We're not going to vote for a platform that supports more wars in Afghanistan, places like that. I mean, it is simply a way to insert a politics of protest into the party nominating process.
Right.
Now, when you get toward the November election, look, both of these parties are going to have candidates, and there will also be third-party candidates, a Green candidate, perhaps Jill Stein, maybe Rocky Anderson running as an independent candidate. And so there, once you've had an interruption of the nominating process by an alternative politics, you might see a number of these candidates trying to compete for that portion of the electorate that seems to be sending a signal. And that's all I'm saying. It's just, it's opening up our politics in a way that it has not been open for quite a long time. It's certainly worth, let me put it this way, in my view, it's certainly worth trying.
Yeah. To what extent do you think the entire Republican primary process, getting back to, this being the Republican primary, has largely been an extended Obama bashing experiment with no costs basically to the Republicans because they're getting free TV time and free exposure? And how much of the Republican primary was really just a money-making hustle for people like Gingrich and Kaine, who are just basically doing book tours, and Michelle Bachmann, whose House race last year was the most expensive one in the nation. I think it cost $13 million bucks, and so she's out there raising money, which will roll into her House campaign.
Oh, look, there's no doubt that there are many people running for the Republican nomination for president who never thought for a second that they were going to be the nominee. They got into this race for a variety of different reasons. Maybe to get a show on Fox, like Mike Huckabee did out of the 2008 campaign. Maybe just to lay groundwork for a 2016 campaign, or, as you suggest, to strengthen their fundraising for a congressional race. All these things are in play. The most unsettling thing is what the Republican contest has said about our media. By and large, the debates have allowed the Republican candidates to say absurd things, to make wild and bizarre claims, and for the most part to go unchallenged by journalists. And so we had a situation where most of our mainstream media for the last 6 to 8 months has really collaborated with a Republican infomercial that certainly, as many of the Occupy folks suggest, ought to be interrupted.
Yeah, well said. John Nichols, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
It's an honor to be with you, Tom.
And to have you. Thank you.